Hello everyone and welcome to another Nerd News review. My name is Tyler and today I'm talking about Fire Emblem Engage. I'm very excited to talk about Engage because Fire Emblem's a series that I've been following for a very long time. With that being said, I'm going to chunk this up into kind of three sections: the story, the gameplay, and the DLC. I wanted to start with the story because I kind of feel like that's where this game is lacking, and just for those of you that are watching that haven't played yet, spoiler warning. So Fire Emblem Engage starts out pretty much like most modern Fire Emblem games. You wake up and have amnesia, so that way you're a blank slate and can make whatever character you want. And in this game, that character is Alear, a divine dragon that is set on the path to fight a war every 1,000 years against a great evil called Sombron. Basically, after this information is conveyed, story gets kind of kooky and convoluted and has a lot of ins and outs and pathways that kind of don't really connect by the end. But most of that is a bit later in the campaign. There's a vast chunk of it that's kind of just set up and meeting all the characters. Up until then, it's very linear, it makes a lot of sense, and for as much as people kind of complained about the characters in this game, I thought there were a lot of memorable ones. But once you get through the setup and you kind of have your first confrontation with the big baddie around chapter 20, it kind of falls apart a little bit. The second piece of the story, which I think most people are 100% on board with, were the Engage Rings. If you don't know, the Engage Ring ability in this is basically characters from previous games that's abilities or powers have been pulling across universes to help in this battle. That's why in the trailer you see Marth and Lynn and a ton of other characters from previous games. And I really don't have a complaint about any of that. It's one of the reasons that this Fire Emblem somehow turned out to be my favorite and least favorite at the same time. But starting around chapter 21 or 22 out of 26, it really just falls apart. Now, keep in mind that up to this point in the game, you were in the previous war 1,000 years ago, and your life was saved from basically dying by your mother in the game. After chapter 21, you are essentially killed because you throw yourself in front of a blast for your sister, and resurrected by her as a pseudo-corrupted to fight on the side of good. After that magic power fades away, you die again. But then miraculously out of nowhere, the rings have the ability to bring you back as an emblem. So 3 or 4 times in this game, they have fake death scenes that just, by the end, you're just like, okay, there's no risks at all in this game. And it kind of comes off as shallow because a lot of them don't seem to be necessary. They could have tweaked the scenes just a little bit, and a lot of it could have been avoided. But making some great sacrifice that has you come back as like a pseudo bad guy form that still fights for the side of good just to fade out again and then be brought back by the emblem rings. It was way too convoluted. They could have just taken out the corrupted thing and the rings could have gotten together, enhanced their power, and kind of how they did it in Three Houses with Byleth, where once there was a critical situation, they could just enhance the abilities to have a big dramatic power up rather than 2 fake out deaths to lead to basically what you were before. There's also a weird stint in this game where you go back in the past to fight yourself from the previous war when you find out that you used to be evil and then your mom came back and saved you, so you turned out to be good. It's just so many different pathways and weird plot twists that either A, don't make sense, or B, just don't need to be there. Like, sometimes having a straightforward story is way better than 6 twists that either don't make sense or feel like they just got shoved in for the sake of having a big reveal. Which to me is the biggest reason that the story is what holds this game back from other ones. I want to move on to the gameplay and mechanics because I think that's where Engage absolutely knocks it out of the park. Almost all of the replayability from this game comes from its mechanics because I gotta admit, this is one of the smoothest Fire Emblem games I have ever played. They really enhanced the combat animations from Three Houses instead of just casually firing a shot or throwing a fireball or swinging a sword. There's full-on animations and characters actually have unique things depending on who they are. There's also an incredibly high level of customization with SP and earning points that you can inherit abilities from the rings to make your characters better in different ways. I actually enjoyed this much more than the customization in Three Houses because Three Houses almost felt overwhelming in everything that you could do to where it almost didn't matter because everybody could kind of do everything. But in Engage, you kind of have to think through your characters and set them on a path. and they can switch pretty liberally within what they've been building for. Like, if you like axes instead of lances, you could switch over to a lance physical class and be fine. But you can't have drastic swings where an archer would suddenly make a good, sword fighter or something else like that. And classes have weapons dedicated to them. In Three Houses, something that was incredibly fun but very broken was that I could make a super strong warrior, but give them a bow or give them a lance or give them whatever weapon they needed to fit a situation better. But in this one, weapons are locked to classes again, which to me was refreshing. But at the same time, they made it to where learning from the emblem rings gives you proficiencies with weapons that aren't matched in your class. So if you did want to reclass, you're more than welcome to after you spend some time and points into learning new things. But between that and the inheritance system from SP and gaining experience from kills, made Engage one of the most fun ways to kind of tweak characters, because you could specialize but make them hone in the places that made the most sense and made characters feel truly unique with some of their unique classes. Some other mechanics in the game that I really enjoyed being brought back was the weapon triangle, but it's been brought back with a fresh coat of paint. In Three Houses, the weapons triangle really didn't exist. Axes were still more powerful and less accurate, and swords were the opposite, and lances were a balance. But there wasn't really a huge punishment for going against what has traditionally been in Fire Emblem for a while. But now, not only do you have bonus damage or less damage depending on the matchup, but they brought in the break system. So in the weapon triangle, swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords. If you attack an enemy with what they're strong against in a rock, paper, scissors style of way, they can't attack you back, and it's extremely punishing because the enemy can do it to you too. And with that, I want to say again that classes are limited to weapons. So if you have a cavalier that can only use lances, it really limits what they can do, where mounted units were kind of the end-all be-all for Three Houses. It gives you a reason to diversify your army. Another new mechanic that was put into this game are backup units. Backup units are basically any unit that's not mounted, or a magic unit. And what this does is it allows you to be next to an enemy unit, and if an ally attacks, that unit comes in and has an 80% chance to hit a unit, and it's set at 10% of their health. So it's basically an extra way to do chip damage, which has generally been archers. And building an army of people on foot to do backups is one of the most satisfying experiences I've had in a Fire Emblem game for a long time, and honestly made some of my favorite characters even better, like Diamant. Being able to train your characters with previous characters from the past and getting a unique dynamic of how would modern characters react with Fire Emblem characters of old is also an incredibly fun experience. They had to limit it because anybody can be friends or have some form of relationship with an emblem ring, so you don't get a ton of info, but it is very fun to kind of hear them talk about their respective games. And at certain points of the chapter, you can actually go to battlefields that are replicated from their game and fight them in their own maps. It's incredibly fun. The paralogs in this game are a cut above what most paralogs are in Fire Emblem games. After completing these and winning, you can actually enhance the abilities even further with that emblem ring, and it kind of deepens the bond between characters, which this leads to more customization and more options for characters to be able to do different things or really hone in and just be a master of a single thing that you've got them dedicated to. The last thing that I want to sum up, because I did finish playing it, is the DLC. And I gotta say, I was very excited for the DLC. I really was. But man, was it poorly executed. The DLC can basically be cut into two different sections. There's the paralogs that it added, and then the Xenologue, which is a side story built within the game. The first part, which I enjoyed thoroughly, were the new paralogs. It essentially added 6 new battles, but 7 new bracelets, including Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude, Hector, and Tiki, and a bunch of people from previous games that felt weird missing from the base game, but we all kind of knew that they were going to get added. But you had to fight them in a map that represented their character, and they were incredibly fun. A bit broken in the sense that once you do these, you're overpowered for the story. But for a longtime fan that recognized most of the characters and the fights, it was an incredibly refreshing experience, and using them in the game and getting to hear new dialogue from them was so much fun. And then there was the Phase 4 DLC, which was called the Xenologue. And when I say that DLC really shit the bed, it really did. I was pretty hyped for it because I liked what they were going to do with the story. It was kind of a parallel universe where there was some new characters added in. The good guys were the bad guys, and some of the bad guys were the good guys. And a lot of characters, they kind of just had their personalities flipped. But it was a DLC focused around the paralog fights and the emblem bracelets that you got from the paralogs in the main game. I was excited for that because I thought it would be neat to have some different styled characters, but it centered around Tiki and Hector and Edelgard and all of those characters that I really enjoyed. However, it came off as pretty shallow. It was kind of just one mission in each territory to kind of quickly brush you through which emblem ring they got, and instead of putting a lot of depth into characters and why they were the way they were, they kind of just came out as opposites for the sake of being opposites, and it really fell apart. The convoluted storytelling kind of fell in with this one as well, where you get two new characters named Nil and Nell, which were neat. They were also dragon-class characters, which was fun to see considering there's only two in the base game. But Nell was just kind of bitter, and Nil had this weird backstab where he wasn't actually the brother of Nell, but he was, and the twins were switched out at birth, so he wanted to do Sombrom's bidding, so he kind of just lay dormant for 1,000 years. And even just talking about it right now feels weird, and it makes less sense when you're actually playing the game. The DLC characters are fun to play as. I like their new unique abilities and builds, but who they are as characters really just threw me off, and I didn't really want to use them because I liked the base cast way more. Another exciting thing is that they were adding two new classes, being the Enchanter and the Mage Cannoneer, but because the game wasn't originally built around them, they feel out of place and they don't really make sense anywhere and kind of just hold your team back. But to sum up the DLC, it sounded really fun. They released a lot of things, especially for the Xenologue, that made it look like it was going to be a whole separate experience. But then it just kind of floundered and puttered out when it came out, and it felt like it was just like we need a fourth wave and the deadlines are up, so let's just get it out there. And then you could whip through it pretty quickly and easily, and now you had a bunch of extra content, but didn't really make sense to use. But the new characters seem a little bit fun. I'm already kind of in this game, though, and it's pretty early, and they're kind of broken characters, so it was just kind of a mess. It was just a disaster at launch that I don't think they really recovered from, and they did not balance it in the game. I think that's going to wrap up my Fire Emblem Engage review. I had a lot of fun with this game. It's one of the most fun Fire Emblem games to play, but your first time through it, the story just gets a little bit convoluted. But you'll always be coming back for more because you're going to think of new ways for characters to do certain things, and you want to test out builds. Summarizing the DLC, the story, and the gameplay, I think I'm going to give this game overall a 7 out of 10. Mostly almost entirely carried by the gameplay, because the story and DLC alone were probably a 4 or a 5. With that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I do release reviews every Monday, so come check those out. And we should be getting the podcast back in order in some slightly different ways, but it's going to be new, it's going to be exciting, and we're kind of diversifying our content. With that, I want to thank you all for watching, and in the comments, put your favorite character. I would love to discuss it with you guys. Mine was Diamant. You should tell me why I'm right or why I'm wrong. So thanks, everybody, and I'll catch you in the next review. Thank you for checking out Nerd News, everybody. We don't have advertising, so you are the advertising. If you like it, tell a friend, like, comment, subscribe, even leave a review on Apple. Everything that you do to support us, we truly appreciate it. And we actually just launched our Patreon, so if you'd like to support us even more, you can go check that out. All of our content is free. We have different rewards for different tiers, so check that out. And thanks again. We'll catch you next time.